Blacks in technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. This is episode number 79 with our guest Lisa Caywood, and this is what you need to know about SDN. SDN is software-defined networking. So we're going to get into what SDN is, and we're going to learn all about it tonight. So first off, I'm your host, Greg Greenlee. No co-host for this evening. I haven't had a co-host in a while. It's getting kind of lonely. But hopefully, somebody will step up to the plate and say, hey, I'll co-host this podcast with you. Ayuri is, she's busy, so, she can't do it like she used to. So, but anyhow, this is your first time listening. You can find us at the following URLs. You can check us out on www.blackintechnology.net. We're also on the Twitters, and that's at Black in Technology, BLKINTECHNOLOGY. We also have a Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/Blacks in Technology. You can check updates there. We also have a LinkedIn group and under Blacks in Technology. So check us out on LinkedIn. Check out the group membership and Blacks in Technology, and we should come up. If you are on Twitter right now, you have any questions for our guests, you can tweet them using the hashtag BitTechTalk, and that's BITTECHTALK. Blacks in Technology is a tech-focused community and media organization focused on increasing diversity in technology. We always focus on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth and development. If you want to partner with us in any way, you can send us an email to partnerships@blacksintechnology.net. Any general inquiries, you can send us an email to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. And if you want to sponsor one of these fun-filled, very informational podcasts, send us an email to sponsorship@blacksintechnology.net. And speaking of forming new partnerships, a few of our partners actually have some announcements from them. Black Founders, they announced our program, Founders Mentors. It's a one-on-one mentoring program for startup entrepreneurs. A select number of high potential entrepreneurs will be paired with experienced entrepreneur mentors. You'll meet at least once a month and get advice you need to move your business forward. The program is open to entrepreneurs all over the world with sessions available in person or via Skype or Google Hangout. The applications were due actually by July 24th. But if you want to go check out more about the program and see what it's about, check out mentors.blackfounders.com/entrepreneur-mentors. So check that site out. DevOps Day Chicago. We're also partnering with them once again this year. It's a 2-day community-driven technical conference that focuses on bridging the gap between development and operations. This year, the conference will take place August 25th and 26th at the University of Chicago Gleacher Center. Members of the Blacks in Technology can use the promo code BIT25 to receive a 25% discount on registration. To learn more about the event or submit a proposal, I don't know if you can still submit proposals right now, but if you want to learn more about the event, check out DevOpsDaysChi.org, and that's DevOpsDaysChi.org. PuppetConf 2015, that's coming up. That's happening in October 5th through the 9th in Portland, Oregon this year. Last year it was in San Fran. This year it's in Portland, Oregon. Registration is open. And let me see. What is Puppet? PuppetConf sessions will range from how to get started with Puppet. Of course, if you don't know what Puppet is a configuration management application. And so their conference is going to range from how to get started with Puppet, modules and related technologies, to advanced tips and tricks for using Puppet, PuppetDB, Razor, Factor, and more. So that's happening October 5th through the 9th. I'm pretty sure that we'll be partnering up with them again for discounts and some possible sponsored passes. So keep checking out our site for more updates on that. Last announcement before we actually get before we actually introduce our guest, is Tech 808. That's one of our newest partnerships. It's a conference that's happening August 15th, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Impact Hub Oakland, located in Oakland, California. It's a one-day tech conference for minority and millennial entrepreneurs. It's a mashup of hip-hop culture, tech, and entrepreneurship. It brings together a diverse range of leaders, speakers, and panelists to educate and inspire future CEOs. Tech 808's mission is to bring awareness of the possibility of tech entrepreneurship within the urban culture. It's sponsored by the Kapoor Center for Social Impact, Impact Hub Oakland, Mailchimp, Wistia, Squad Up, and Swarkick. And right now there are discounts available. If you use the code BIT when you register, you will receive $75 off the regular attendance ticket. And we're also giving away some sponsored passes to the Oakland event. And if you're interested in receiving a sponsored pass, email us or contact us at blacksintechnology.net. They have to be in by August 7th in order to receive those sponsored passes. There's actually some sponsored passes that we're giving away for the New York 808 Tech 808 conference, and those are all, we've given those all out, so there's no more passes for that, but we still have passes available for the Oakland event. So again, email us or contact us at blocksandtechnology.net if you're interested. I think we have about 4 more sponsored passes to give away. All right, now we are going to, or I'm going to introduce our guest, Lisa Caywood. Lisa Caywood, she's a senior product manager, marketing manager with Brocade Communication Systems, and she focuses on orchestration and SDN initiatives. She has held a variety of security and data center marketing roles at Cisco, with previous marketing and business development experience in the business analytics and semiconductor sectors. Lisa holds a BA from Tufts University, where she researched the role of technology transfer in the political economy of Greater China. And she blogs about networking and the tech industry at theborgqueen.wordpress.com. It can be found on Twitter at RealLisaC, RealLisaC. So welcome, Lisa, to the show. I'm definitely glad that you can join us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem, no problem. So real quick, the Borg Queen. Tell me about that title. What made you go with the? I of course, because I know the Star Trek lingo. I know what the Borg is. So, but tell us why you decided to go with the Borg Queen.
Well, it was. This was a few years back. I originally had my actual photo as my Twitter avatar, and at one point, this was when my kids were a bit younger. I had been listening to way too much kid music in the car as I was driving around in my minivan, and I was starting to sing it to myself, and I just got really frustrated with my hopelessly boring mom life one day, and I was feeling dark and black and bleak, and so I changed my Twitter avatar to the picture of the Borg Queen. And it got a very interesting response. A lot of people were very concerned about me. They wanted to know if I was okay. Other people felt like I had finally revealed my true self and owned up to who I really am. Eventually, I wound up changing my Twitter avatar again because I got tired of people being so concerned about me. But some years later, when I finally started the blog, I was sort of casting about for a name, and a friend of mine kept saying, the Borg Queen. It has to be the Borg Queen. So it's the Borg Queen.
Nice. So give us a little bit of information about your background, your educational and your tech background.
Sure. So I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad was an engineer, and I spent my entire childhood firmly convinced I was never, ever going to have anything to do with tech. So, of course, I have never done anything but work for technology companies. Now, having spent my entire childhood firmly convinced I was never going to have anything to do with tech, I I have a liberal arts degree. I double majored in Asian studies and English. Asian studies was my pre-professional degree because I couldn't quite stomach the notion of a business degree. Nonetheless, as you mentioned, my senior research project wound up being about both business and technology. So it happened that the summer after my junior year in college, I was looking for a job that, was something other than retail that I could put on a resume. And my father, the engineer, made introductions for me with, at the time, a hard drive company. And so I worked in their customer service department that summer, and found that I started being able to diagnose from people's descriptions fairly quickly whether they actually had a problem or if it was something that could be remedied, and I found the whole thing kind of cool. And so that was kind of what really got me interested in saying, okay, well, this tech thing could be kind of cool. And so I've been in tech ever since.
Very nice, very nice. It's kind of funny how what you envision at a young age, as far as like, hey, I'm not doing that for the rest of my life, and then how it comes back and kind of. I went all the way through
I didn't in fact declare a major until halfway through my junior year because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I only knew that I didn't want to do tech.
Pretty funny. So now you're a senior product marketing manager at Brocade. You worked in various marketing roles at Cisco. Give us a perspective on the intersection of marketing and tech, and why you feel that why is marketing so important to the tech industry? Because if you ask some engineers, they hate marketing. Oh no, marketing.
Well, I have my days as well. There's a lot of silliness in marketing, absolutely no doubt about that. But at the same time, especially for, outside the consumer tech space, when we're talking about business technology, we're talking about very, very complex stuff. Right. And, what I like most about my job is helping people figure out what it is that we're talking about, and whether it's something that they ought to be looking at more seriously, and whether what's in it for them. I like engaging with people. I like the educational aspect, and that's fundamentally why I keep winding up back in marketing, despite my own issues with the silliness, the occasional silliness.
So let me ask you this: what exactly does a senior product marketing manager do? And the second question is, so how do you go about making sure that you are fluent and very knowledgeable about the products that you are presenting to people?
Sure. So a PMM is the sort of the outbound half of a very close team. There should be a very close partnership between the product marketing manager and the product manager. And I've pretty much always been very lucky to have a very good relationship with my PM. So the product manager is the person who's responsible for more sort of the inbound side of marketing, the market requirement gathering and product definition, pricing, packaging, things like that. In some industries, the product manager and the product marketing manager are kind of one and the same. In tech, it tends to be sort of split. So the PM does the inbound side of things, and the PMM does the outbound side of things. So the how you position the product vis-a-vis either within the portfolio, your own portfolio, or vis-a-vis competitors, how you decide to talk about the product, key messages, what you really want to get across about your product that is unique and special and different. So there's a lot of message definition, content generation, but in addition to that, the PMM is sort of the the chief marketing officer for that product, and we typically work with all of the other functions within marketing to, they're effectively service organizations for my product. So, I work with PR and CorpCom and with demand gen to build demand and lead gen programs and with events and so forth and so on. So all of the different aspects of corporate marketing functions are things that I have to pull in to create a full-blown, full-breadth marketing plan for my product.
Right. So you basically have to know what you're talking about in order to position and present your product in the best way. Meaning, if you're doing it this way and you're a competitor, you have to know about your competitor's product as well as what your product is and what the differences are between the two. And to know that, you can't be messing around. You can't not know some of the
it really helps. It really helps if you know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yes. To be fair, so a lot of PMMs actually have engineering backgrounds in tech, just because the stuff is so complicated.
Right.
And so, that's where a lot of PMMs come from. Now, in larger companies, for example, when I was at Cisco, there were sort of two groups of people even within product marketing. There were the content people who tended to have technical backgrounds, and they wrote the content. And then the sort of the program definition and management and so forth would be handled by less technical people within that group. Right. Now, at Brocade and at smaller companies, that's not, we don't have enough people to do that, and so I'm the one-woman band who does all of that for my product. Gotcha. But so there tends to be a range of skill sets even within product marketing. And again, I don't actually have a technical background. I simply, I ask lots of questions.
Hey, that's the best way. Best way to learn.
It absolutely is.
So, in your bio, I was reading about how you address organizational aspects of technology transfer and technology transitions is a key part of market development work for disruptive technologies. So give us your definition on what a disruptive technology is.
So I actually really dislike the term. I don't, because we're trying to make lately in tech punditry, we've been trying to make a virtue out of something that is really problematic. And so anytime you introduce a fundamentally new and divergent type of technology, you're causing problems and heartache for people in the short term. Long term, it may be a really good thing. But in the short term, it causes pain and heartache and frustration and friction within IT organizations. Right. And that has to do with, oh my God, I have to learn new skills. I didn't want to have to learn those new skills. Now I have to go talk to people that I'm not used to talking to, and maybe I don't even like those people because the few times I've talked to them in the past, they've been really difficult to work with, SecOps. And and they speak a different language than I do because they're used to thinking about things in a different way. Our processes aren't set up to do this. It might be anything from our budgeting and purchasing processes aren't set up for this to, our operational processes aren't set up for this. And so it can be very hard, especially if you're sort of one person who's relatively low on the totem pole who thinks this new thing coming down the pike is really cool and you want to bring it into your organization, but it is a very disruptive technology in, the very traditional sense. Because you have to bring everybody else along with you if you really want to make it happen. And so that requires a very different skill set, a very, diplomatic and political skill set that a lot of IT people don't naturally haven't had to acquire. Right. But, to bring that along, that's a key part of the whole process of technology adoption.
Gotcha. So let's get into what this podcast is about, which is SDN, Software Defined Networking. So tell us what SDN is, and tell us how it's different than, quote unquote, regular networking.
Sure. To level set a little bit, for those who aren't necessarily involved in the networking space all that much, networks are sort of layered in some ways like the brain itself. So we talk about the data plane, also known as the forwarding plane, the control plane, and the management plane. And very briefly, the management plane is where you describe what you want to have happen. So the management plane is typically the interface with the human operator. The control plane is what figures out how it should happen. So if you're saying I want this particular the traffic for this particular workload to have these go through these particular points in the network, or have these particular things done to it, or I want it to follow this particular path for whatever reason, the control plane is the set of functions that determines how to do that. The data plane or forwarding plane is the execution plane. It just simply sits there and forwards packets from one place to the next. It is under the direction of the control plane. So now in regular networking, for a very long time,
I like that term.
All of that has been vertically integrated. So you buy a box from your favorite networking vendor, and it has all of those things, preloaded as a consolidated software stack on that box. And what that has meant is that you have to go and configure each box as its own unique entity. Right. And especially if you've got a large data center, that means that whenever you're racking and stacking stuff, you're doing the same thing, because everything's done by CLI. You're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, and hoping you're doing it the same way each time. Now, there are some tools that exist to kind of help with that. They tend to be specific to the operating system of that particular product or group of products. So if you have different OSs, different networking OSs in your thing, then you're using a bunch of different element managers, and so it can be very hard to have the same configurations and the same types of policies implemented everywhere in your network.
Right.
Okay, so that's sort of one piece of it. So we've got this interoperability challenge, right? Because we don't have a good way of, so there's just the basic setup and configuration challenge that needs automation. We have this interoperability challenge between the management planes because we don't have a good way of a common framework for how we describe what we want to have happen. And now, in addition to that, there was the rise of sort of the web scale companies, Google, Facebook, et cetera.
Right.
And, they've gone in a very extreme direction with custom hardware that they write their own software for and so forth. And I remember I was at a Tech Field Day event, I don't know, 3 years or so ago, and there was a panel of some vendors plus a couple of guys from Google and Yahoo, and the Google and Yahoo guys were absolutely adamant. They kept pounding their fists on the table practically and saying, "I do not want to be waiting 18 to 24 months for a new feature that I need to come from my networking vendor. I've got zillions of devs on staff. They're some of the best in the world. I just need access to the source code, and they can go build me what I need to build." So that brings in the sort of third element of SDN, which is programmability. And this is also something that sort of arose out of this sort of where SDN really originated, which was on university campuses. We had a bunch of hackers who wanted to play and do funky things on a network of some size, but of course the university network administrators certainly didn't want them doing it on their production network. So how do you do both? Well, one way to do that is to virtually segment off the network while giving them access to the whole network. And so that was where sort of you put those two ideas together of how can I make my network programmable, and how can I use it to do various different things in an isolated but centralized way. And that's kind of where SDN all came about.
Gotcha. And I think I've seen a few videos. I don't know if they were the creators of SDN, but I think they came from that, at least from that research on SDN. It's actually, I wish I had. Maybe I'll look that up and then I post that in the show notes. But I can send you the link. There's a very well-known video of Scott Schenker gave a talk some years back that it really just very clearly defines sort of what the whole thing is about and what they were really trying to do. I'm happy to. I'll send you that link. Oh, definitely. Thank you. So SDN is really this separation of the software from the actual. And this is kind of simplifying a lot more than what it is, but the software, the control plane from the forwarding plane, right?
Yes.
You have the centralized controller that's programmable, that you can set up all your the way you want your traffic, any traffic shaping that needs to take place, all your routes and everything on it, and this pushes it out to the forwarding plane, which is normally your switches or your routers or whatever, and then that's kind of how it's done. Am I correct in?
Yeah, there are a couple of little nuances there that I think are probably kind of important. So one is, we talk about the controller and talk about it being a centralized thing, and then that immediately makes people go, oh, well, that's not scalable, and what if it falls over and so forth. When we're talking about centralization, we're talking about it being logically centralized. So in fact, controllers are deployed in clusters, like you would any other significant software, right? So, but what that really so even though we're talking about quote unquote centralization, we're really talking about logical centralization. You have a logically centralized view of your network end to end, including, so now the atomic unit of your network isn't your switch or your port, it's the flow end to end across the network. That's your atomic unit. And because you have this logically centralized entity that can see that whole thing, you now have a view of your entire network. But we're not talking about a physically centralized controller. So that's one sort of a bit of confusion that I often wind up having to clear up. The other thing is the introduction of SDN kind of blew apart that traditional vertically integrated model, and it wound up having a lot of different things come off of it, not all of which are SDN itself. So, for example, the whole white box movement, putting Linux on a standard, a Linux-based routing software on a commodity server. Not SDN as such. That's not necessarily separating the control plane from the data plane, but it was something that became easier for people to imagine and envision working once you sort of broke the mental model of a vertically integrated software stack that comes embedded in a specific type of hardware. So when we're talking about separating the forwarding plane from the data plane, we're still talking entirely about software that is entirely independent from the platforms that are doing the forwarding. So you can be using SDN to be managing physical platforms, to be managing virtual platforms as well, whether you're talking about vSwitches, vRouters, virtual appliances. And in fact, that is that whole set of virtualized functions, called NFV, is actually increasingly one of the main use cases that people really look to SDN for.
Gotcha. So, so we kind of went over, why SDN is needed and why there's this need, which is one of them is interoperability. So tell me, who are some of the key players in SDN right now?
Sure. So a little bit of history. There were a number of open source based controllers very early on that mostly came out of universities. RIU, Knox, Floodlight originally came out of a university as well, as I recall. And then as the hype cycle began on the upswing, most of the major networking vendors decided that they needed to have their own controller because there was this sudden fear that if you didn't have a controller, all of the intelligence and value was going to be sucked out of your equipment, and you were going to lose control of your destiny. Now, I want to stress once again, the fact that you separate your control plane from your data plane says nothing about what you might need or not need from a hardware perspective.
Right.
In some cases, for some workloads or for some organizations, commodity hardware may be just fine. In other cases, say high frequency trading or the web tier of an e-retailer, hardware matters a lot. Latency matters a lot. So
right.
What SDN is really giving us is not, the hardware becomes irrelevant. It's you can make your hardware or your platform choices independently of your feature choices. So you can optimize your platform versus your feature functionality as separate things. So you can still go with cheap commodity hardware if that's not a major the hardware performance isn't a major concern, and still get the features that you might need for your particular environment. So
Makes sense.
to backtrack to who are the key players, most of the major networking vendors kind of jumped in with their own homegrown controllers about 2.5 years ago. So Cisco has one. Actually, they have a couple, 2 or 3. HP came out with one fairly early on. Nuage has one as well. Nuage being a subsidiary of Alcatel-Lucent, which is in the process of being acquired by Nokia. And Juniper came out with one. And I would be remiss, of course, in not mentioning Brocade. We came out with ours relatively recently. And we're sort of part of this sort of phase 3 of SDN controller history. There was this wave of people building their own proprietary controllers. But of course, this just sort of reinvented the same problem all over again with regard to interoperability. It's just at a higher level of abstraction, right? We're now talking about element managers that are just higher level and more complex. So that didn't really solve the most basic problems that people had, which was management interoperability. And for reasons entirely unrelated to that, Cisco and IBM and a couple other people got together and said, let's do an open source controller. Brocade and a few others jumped in as well, and so we were also founding members of Open Daylight, which is at this point the leading open source controller. It's run by the Linux Foundation with support from virtually every networking vendor you can think of, as well as a number of software companies with interests in networking. So Microsoft is a supporter, Citrix is a member, and so forth. Not all have necessarily done commercial distributions of Open Daylight, although Brocade has. Cisco now has. Extreme has done a version, that is to say they've taken pieces of the Open Daylight code and merged on some of their own stuff and used the components, some of the components of Open Daylight to make their own controller. So different people have different approaches to Open Daylight, as has been true of open source software for some time. So those are, I think, probably most of the major players I think I've mentioned. Oh, I don't think I mentioned VMware. Actually, VMware was when it acquired Nicira, which was one of the original pioneers.
Right.
But they're not members of Open Daylight.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I kind of want to reiterate the point you were making about the hardware because there's Cisco has their own specialized ASICs that they use for their switches because their switching is done in hardware, and that's not the same as having a regular piece of commodity hardware like a server and running software on it that allows you to do SDN. These ASICs are special, so they switch a lot faster, and they're specialized, meaning they're made specifically to switch packets. So commodity hardware is usually just that. It's not made specifically to do one thing. It's made to do whatever you want it to do, but it's not specifically made to do that certain thing. So just kind of wanted to hit on that, and in case people didn't understand that what that meant as far as the hardware. So what products does Brocade have as far as SDN?
Yeah. So as I said, we have a commercial distribution of Open Daylight. It is in our case, it is the Open Daylight code. What we do, and this is a little bit different from what other people would do, but what we do is we work on everything directly within the project. Now, some people, the way they approach it is they develop certain technologies in-house. Cisco Opflex is a good example of this, and then they'll contribute that as a contribution to the project. And then the project as a whole, the committers can say yay or nay as to whether they want to accept that contribution or not. What we do with what our engineering team does is we work directly within the project. So we're downloading the entirety of the community code 2 or 3 times a week, making big bug fixes, enhancements, and then we contribute those all back upstream. Our distribution is effectively I don't want to say it's the entirety of the community code because there are a number of projects, there are new projects within the Open Daylight community that are being proposed all the time, and so many of them are very immature. We take the major pieces that we have tested together and that we can stand behind from a support perspective, and we include those in our commercial distribution. So we're not doing anything to the controller itself that is different than what is in the community code. We don't necessarily have every single project because not all of them are ready for prime time, but everything that we have is the community code. And then, what we're providing with our commercial distribution is what you would get with, a standard open source commercial distribution, right? Support, education, professional services relating to that distribution.
Okay. So let me ask you this. When it comes to network engineers, sysadmins, what does SDN mean for these particular professionals? Are they going to have to, basically relearn what they know about networking, or are they going to have to, kind of relearn what they know about, how things are connecting, or is this going to be if someone was going to bring in SDN, is this going to be an easy transition?
I think to some degree it will depend on when people get on the train. And let me explain what I mean by that a little bit. So right now we're still in the very early stages of even developing this technology. Everybody is, even those who are sort of 2 or 3 years down the path. And so things are the good news is that it's wide open. You can kind of shape it to what you want and need. The bad news is it's fairly wide open. You have to shape it to whatever you want and need. So for people who are, going down the path right now, deploying right now, there is some pretty aggressive reskilling going on. At ONS, AT&T, who is just starting deployment now, they talked about the fact that they had on the order of tens of thousands of engineers, network engineers, who they are putting through retraining. They worked with I think it was Georgia Tech to develop a series of courses around Python, which is a scripting language that's commonly used for working with especially open source controllers, for learning some Java, things like this. And as much as it is learning about any specific language, it's learning how to think in software terms. It's learning how to think in terms of objects and
right.
That type of logic, as opposed to what network engineers are accustomed to doing, which is thinking in terms of protocols and doing things by CLI. So it's a mental shift as much as it is learning particular skills. As we get further down the pike, as we start seeing more packaged commercial applications for controllers, I think this is probably going to be less and less required. It's an interstitial phase. There was some hullabaloo, I'd say, a year or so ago about all network engineers are going to have to learn to become programmers and the sky is falling.
Right.
I would say that the elite network engineers going forward are probably going to need to learn some programming, no matter what. At the same time, there's always going to be room for and need for people who know how to rack and stack things. That's probably going to become a relatively unique skill, perhaps not core to it. It might be something that your VAR does for you when they deliver your equipment, as opposed to something that you do as part of your standard job, because you've sort of begun to focus on different things if you're an enterprise IT. But I think that to a large extent, this is a somewhat interstitial phase from a network engineer perspective. Now, the friction is actually, with one exception, which I'll get to in a minute, the friction is not so much between network engineers and sysadmins, it's between network engineers and app developers. And it's, in some cases it's friction, and in some cases it's just, I've never talked to these people before, I don't know how to talk to them, where do I even start? And when I've gone through sort of the architecture of Open Daylight, the Open Daylight controller with people, in fact, I was walking a VAR through it one time, and I got about, from working from the network platforms up, I got them as far as the service abstraction layer, which is where you create abstracted, genericized models of the switches and routers that you're going to be operating on. And then I started talking about the northbound API, which is where you would program, what you want to have happen, and that was where I lost him. Right. And he said, "You know what? I'm a networking engineer. I know networks. You lost me right there." And but the point I made to him, and that I consistently make to channel partners in particular, is because these are people who are seeing their margins diminish to practically nothing, because it's hard to differentiate on just boxes at this point, and they're being squeezed horribly. It's an immense opportunity for new services revenue, for new value-added services that they can offer, especially VARs who have a distinct vertical specialty. VARs who are focused in the federal space, or in the education space, or in the financial space, or
Hello? I think we lost Lisa. We'll take a second. Hopefully she'll jump back on the line. I will tweet her real quick. Let's see. So I just tweeted her, so hopefully she'll get that message and she'll jump back on. We're having a very interesting discussion about software-defined networks, learning a lot. definitely some interesting knowledge being passed around here. I haven't myself messed around with SDN, but it's definitely something I've been keeping my eye on. We're not using it currently where I work at, but I definitely see, kind of where it's going. And it's like Lisa said, it's not in its most mature state as of yet. And I'm actually going to talk to her about that when she jumps back on the line, because we're talking about what it means for network engineers and sysadmins. And then we'll be talking about what it means for businesses and, whether or not SDN is ready for prime time right now. We had an interesting discussion on Blacks in Technologies forum about, the people that are in that space that are doing it in production right now are only people that have the money to kind of throw at it, meaning they have the resources to work with SDN and tailor it to how they want it to work within their environment and their infrastructure, but not necessarily, enterprise. They don't have those resources to just say, hey, we're gonna introduce this new technology and we're gonna throw it, a bunch of developers and people at it in order to make it work for us. The Googles can, because they can develop their own hardware. They have developed some of the brightest developers there are. So I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier for them as opposed to an enterprise business that's just has a limited number of people on staff, things like that. So hopefully, I don't think I got cut off. Let me make sure. Yeah, I'm still taping. Just waiting on Lisa to jump back on. So hopefully she jumps back on here. We can finish out this podcast. Got some more questions to ask her. So hopefully everybody listening is enjoying the discussion, learning a little bit about SDN. Go check out the Open Daylight project under the Linux Foundation. Learn what they're doing. Learn about SDN. It's definitely something engineers and sysadmins are going to need to know about. So get in early, become an expert at it. Become a thought leader. Even get ahead of the curve. That's usually a lot of people are kind of they play catch up, and this is. The big companies right now are doing it, but not everybody is doing it. And if you can be that person that acquires those skills.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
You can be ahead of, no problem. No problem. It was just, I kept it going.
Where did I lose you?
We were talking about, I don't know. We were talking about what it means for network engineers and sysadmins. I can't recall exactly what you said last.
Okay.
But let me ask you this. So you were saying something about I know something that you were talking about that I wanted to touch on is network engineers not being able to talk to I think you said developers.
Yeah.
Right. So let me ask you this. What do you mean by why is that relationship going to be important going forward?
So in some companies and some shops we're talking a lot about DevOps, right?
Right.
And there are a lot of reasons why that's a little bit. There's the dev part of it is sort of at cross purposes with the ops part of it, especially the networking part of it, where the DevOps mentality is work quickly, iterate fast, keep moving. And the networking mentality is don't break anything. No matter what, make sure everything stays up. And so it's very, very antithetical to the notion of, oh, yeah, I'll just try this, and if that doesn't work, I'll just try something else. So there's that sort of mentality difference, but it's also just, you start talking about Java and C# and Ruby and to a network engineer who's used to thinking in terms of protocols and CLIs and
right. All right, got you. So I think it's going to be even more crucial once you have things such as developers talking to these engineers about kind of like these sessions and these flows that they need to have programmed as well for their app to work properly. So that's going to be a whole different ball game as well.
Absolutely.
Because network, like you said, network engineers are not used to talking to dev people, and I think this whole thing with even the DevOps movement, where you have operations and you have developers, kind of working together collaboratively now. A lot of companies are not up to that speed even because sysadmins don't normally talk to developers in that fashion. It's always been the thing of let me throw my code over the wall and now you just make it work. And so now you're going a little bit extra and you're saying not only did you have to talk to sysadmins, now you have to talk to the network engineers. And so,
yeah. So there have been a couple of different ways that people have been addressing this. Adrian Cockcroft gave a really interesting talk at ONOG a few weeks ago, and he had been active at Netflix for a while. And what they did
right.
at Netflix was they had a sort of a cross-training program where they, the people who were admitted to the program, could go work on anything they found interesting within the company for, I think, 3 months, and then decide whether they wanted to keep doing it or go back to their old jobs. Well, the networking people really wanted to kind of get DevOps started in their department, but they couldn't get anybody to come join them because everybody thought, well, networking stuff, that's boring, why would I want to do that? So they reframed the whole thing as this, fascinating large distributed systems problem, and all of a sudden they had people coming in and joining them. And so what they wound up doing was they would pair a developer with a networking person as kind of a two-person team. And, everybody kind of got to learn from everybody else. And, he admitted that, some people kind of stayed more networking-ish and some people kind of stayed more dev-ish, but everybody kind of learned how to talk to each other and, began to gain an appreciation for what they needed to do. Within Open Daylight, actually, it was actually in the first year very challenging to find people who had the right skill set to be involved in the project because you do need very deep knowledge of networking in order to know what to do. But at the same time, most of those people don't necessarily know a whole lot about coding. And so a lot of the devs to begin with, the early devs, were networking people who taught themselves how to code. Right. What we've done on our engineering team, our open source engineering team, is we've then subsequently brought on a lot of people who are used to thinking in terms of application architectures and things like this to help with shoring up a lot of the foundational architecture of the project. It's a very cross-functional, cross-disciplinary kind of mix that we've got on our team, and that's increasingly true of the project as a whole.
That's great to hear. I always try to advocate. I'm actually trying to I try to push that at my current job right now. Just that the whole that whole aspect of more of that empathetic type of environment, right? Where, you might have the guy who only deals with virtualization now, sitting and going through training with the storage guys. So at least he knows, kind of what is going on when it comes to storage and what are some of the pros and cons and, whatever is involved with storage management. And the same thing with, networking guy, have him kind of sit with the virtualization guy. So it's super important, and especially in with the advent of virtualization and everything nowadays. A lot of that stuff there's this gray area where a lot of that intersects now, and people need to be. I feel that people need to be more empathetic as to what other members on different teams, what they do day to day, and how what they do impacts or could impact another team. So I'm always trying to advocate for this cross-disciplinary, kind of cross-functional type of team training. I think it's important.
It's a really exciting time. I think that more people are open to it. More people are open to teaching people from different disciplines. More people are open to learning about other disciplines than I think ever before, because precisely what you said, and we're kind of the themes are kind of barging up against each other, and there's kind of no way to move forward without doing that. And so I think there's a lot of openness all around to teaching and to learning and to sharing. And I think that's if you're not part of it, you should probably really think hard about whether you want to still be in IT.
Yeah, I agree. So let me ask you this: we talk about some of the key players in SDN. So I wanted to ask you, because we had an interesting discussion on our forums where I posed a question that if anyone is out there currently playing with SDN technology, and there was some back and forth about SDN, but something interesting someone said was that SDN is not really ready for prime time, and only these large companies that can throw a bunch of money at it are doing it. So how true is that? And when I say large companies, I mean companies like like the Googles and maybe like the Facebooks, the people that have the money and the resources to throw at SDN and make it work for them.
Yeah. So I think those are two slightly separate questions. Is SDN ready for prime time? It kind of depends on who you are. And it depends on who you are, because it depends on what you have in the way of resources that you can and are willing to throw at something. That's absolutely true. So there are as I say, AT&T is just starting deployment, active real life deployment of their Domain 2.0 project, which is SDN based. We have a number of other large telcos who are starting down that same path. A couple of major financials, and that's true of a number of other controller vendors in the industry. I think for your average enterprise, as I said earlier, it probably won't make sense until there are more packaged applications that they can consume. Unless they're for whatever reason really gung-ho on developing their own. But strangely enough, this came very much as a surprise to me. I find myself doing a lot of briefings for K through 12 school districts, which are sort of the last people I would have expected to be interested in SDN.
Right. I don't normally see them on a cutting edge of technology.
They're not necessarily looking at it right now. But what's happening is they're getting a bunch of money to put computers in the schools for a variety of reasons, standardized testing and all of these other things. And they want to make sure that they're future proofed. But as soon as you start talking to them about the fact that they have standardized testing, and they the fact that you can do traffic scheduling manage these spikes that they have in usage, on all the different campuses they have in their school district where they don't have IT people on site, and that now with SDN they can manage that from a centralized location. They start going, and there are a couple of we're working with one company that we've got a partner that has developed this rather interesting app that can actually be used by teachers to manage internet use of their students. They themselves can do that without involving IT people at all, and that's really interesting. And then you say, well, really what this application is doing is it's collecting all this data. Not only are you managing the access, but you're collecting all of this data on the back end of, who's doing what on the network and what the results of their learning process is. And now you have all this data about the student. And also groups of students and how different groups of students interact with each other and in an online learning environment and what the results are.
Wow.
And that's incredibly powerful and compelling for teachers. And so, you start talking about those kinds of things, and all of a sudden you can kind of mentally, hear the timeline in their heads kind of shifting back more and more towards the present. It's more a question of, are there applications I can use right now to do something, interesting, valuable, useful to me right now? And
right.
that's really what it's going to come down to, I think, for most people.
Right, and that's really interesting. And I was kind of saying this when you dropped off the line, is that that's really interesting because it's things are wide open right now, right? As far as SDN and applications that can be created for it, and if you get in it right now, you start learning it, you can be ahead of the curve, and that just makes yourself that much more valuable to an employer, or even as if you're if you have like that entrepreneurial spirit, now you can leverage that to maybe create a new product.
Exactly. I mean, the opportunity here from an entrepreneurial perspective is amazing.
Excellent.
Because it's just wide open.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to get on do a topic on it, because people in our community need to be aware of some of the cutting edge technologies going on out there, and some of the possibilities of not only increasing their income but also possibly becoming entrepreneurs in this space. So let me ask you this: how can someone start learning and start experimenting with SDN? So we talked about Google, and you mentioned a few telcos that are rolling this out, but they're billion-dollar companies. How can somebody like me, for instance, begin experimenting with SDN here at my house? Yeah.
So my answer is going to be a little bit of a commercial, but I don't know anybody else who's doing this.
Okay.
We have a free eval that of our distribution, and it is the distribution. You can download it if you go to store.brocade.com, and you can click on Try It Now, and that'll give you a license to manage up to 5 network devices, so 5 network nodes for a year in a non-production environment. It also comes with 60 days of free support to help you get started. There's also on our GitHub page, so that's just github.com/brocade. There's a whole slew of tutorial videos, how to get started, working with Mininet, working with different kinds of things, a bunch of Python and Ruby libraries, building. There's app dev tutorials for the controller and so forth. So there's lots of stuff there. We're always interested in feedback of what would help people more. But
okay.
You can get started for free. There's no platform dependency. You can be working with Mininet. All you need is to spin up a VM on whatever box you might happen to be running, as long as it supports the protocols. Whether it's OpenFlow or NetConf or a couple of the other ones.
Okay. Excellent. I will.
I should also say there are a couple of I don't know them off the top of my head, but there are a couple of Python for network engineers online courses. You can Google for them. I do know that they exist. Some are for fee and some are free. And I don't know, I can't speak to the quality. I haven't been through them, but I do know that they exist.
I will write that down, and I will do a Google search on it and include that in the show notes. Excellent. Thank you for that. So what's next for you, and what's next for SDN?
I'm going to be busy for the next couple of years. A lot of it is really just at this point, it's still a lot of education, but it's also, really, I'm really focused on those focused vertical types of applications and solutions that we can put together to kind of, speed this up for a lot of people. So, and also trying to develop a core of application developers for the Open Daylight platform. So that's something that, I'm working with the Open Daylight community on. We actually had on Monday of the summit this past week, we had an evening event where we solicited members of the community to come and pitch their application ideas to a panel of judges. We had about 75 people show up as audience members. We had six people signed up, and then we had one guy who was sitting in the back of the room and just threw together a quick pitch while he was sitting there, and said, "Hey, can I pitch one too?" And so there were a couple of cool ones. The one that won actually was a woman who had an idea for using the controller as a system sensor, and using that to deliver on real-time information about power and cooling needs in the data center, and then turning around and executing changes based on whether you're hitting certain thresholds or what have you. So again, using it beyond just sort of the classical network management kinds of applications a lot of people tend to think of first, but thinking of it more in terms of, I've got all this fabulous network data, what can I do with it? In a practical, bigger world kind of sense.
Interesting. Kind of like or what it sounds like to me is kind of like the Nest for data centers. It's pretty cool.
I'll tell her that's her pitch line.
What's that?
Next time she pitches that, I'll tell her next time she pitches that, she ought to use that line.
Right. And so, where can people learn more about what you're doing? How can they follow you, or can you give your URLs, your Twitter handle? I know I gave it earlier, but
yeah. So I'm on Twitter at RealLisaC, all one word. I'm at Brocade. My product is www.brocade.com/SDN controller, a really good thing to follow, another really good Twitter handle to follow is Open Daylight SDN, again, all one word. And you can also go to opendaylight.org and learn more about the Open Daylight platform.
Excellent. Well, Lisa, I want to thank you for coming on the show and providing us with a lot of great knowledge about SDN, and also, the links too for getting started with SDN. So definitely want to again thank you for that. And what else? I think. What about are you? I'm going to ask this real quick before I let you go. Are you involved in any conferences? Like, are you giving any talks or anything coming up?
I'm not. Certainly members of my team are always out speaking on various things. We just finished up, again, actually they're busy with the Developer Summit today and tomorrow for Open Daylight. And then I think we've sort of got a little bit of a break from the conference perspective, and then we start again in October or something like that. So, there's we always have Brocade people who are engineers who are out talking and so forth that people can look for. Tom Nato is that's actually another really good resource. Tom Nato, who leads our engineering team, kind of wrote the book, the O'Reilly SDN book, and that would be another good resource. He's actually in the process of it was first published a couple of years ago. He's in the process of updating it for a second edition, like as we speak. So that's another good resource.
What's his name again? Tom
Nato, Nadeau. And it's the O'Reilly SDN book.
Excellent. I have to look that up. We have a partnership with O'Reilly, so
there you go.
Yeah, Definitely. And you can also be found blogging at theborgqueen.wordpress.com. That's BORG, or actually it's THEBORGQUEEN.wordpress.com.
That's correct.
Great. Well, Lisa, thanks again. I want to wish you the best in the future, and hope maybe one day we'll have you back on here and we'll be talking about some more SDN stuff.
It would be my pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot, and have a nice night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that's it for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining in with us tonight. Definitely thanks to our guest, Lisa Caywood, for her very insightful interview about SDN. If you like what you heard tonight, you want to let us know, and you have any suggestions or comments or people or possible candidates for the Big Tech Talk podcast, email us your suggestions to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have somebody, a surprise for our next guest, and I'll let you know about that pretty soon here. But until then, remember, tech yourself before you wreck yourself. Take care and have a good night.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.